get you ready. Well, you have to play Romamu. You playing that on?
Yeah, in E.
So you keep the capo on?
No capo for that. Is that the first thing?
Yeah. Jeff, give me some filler.
You ready?
Yeah, we got 4 minutes.
Okay, let's just pulling out pages. Where's Barry? Where's Mr. Barry? You guys are allowed to talk still. Let the kids.
how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. Aleichem, salam aleikum. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. Shalom aleichem, salam aleikum. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. How good it is, how sweet it is to be together on this day. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad.
We turn to page 124. Please join me. We enter the sanctuary to welcome Shabbat. Within these walls, we sit surrounded by numberless generations. Our ancestors built the synagogue as a visible sign of God's presence in their midst. Throughout our long history and our endless wandering, it has endured. A beacon of truth, love, and justice for all humanity. Its presence guided our ancestors to lives of righteousness, holding up to them a vision of their truest selves. Now we, in our turn, come into this sanctuary to affirm the sacredness of our lives. May we enter this place in peace. May holiness wrap around us as we cross its threshold. Weariness, doubt, the flaws within our human hearts, the harshness of the weak, let these drop away at the door. In the brightness of Shabbos, let peace settle upon us as we lift our hearts in prayers. It's our great honor to welcome the Hamburg family to the Bima as they light our Shabbat candles. 120. No, sit, sorry.
Mitzvotav metzivanu lehatlik ner shel Shabbat.
So, just quick clarification. When I quickly do this, that's a sign to Caleb to give Cantor Whitner more juice. When I need you to stand, for those who are able, we rise together to 123 as Tillman lead us in Kiddush. Grab that Kiddush cup. I hope you got that, Caleb. It's not on.
That would be helpful.
Okay. Go, buddy.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei puri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu. V'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron lema'aseh v'reishit, ki hu yom techila v'mikrayei kodesh, zecher litziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'char בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen.
L'chaim. Take that
L'chaim.
Please be seated.
No, you got it.
The top of page 127, we read together, "There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that never can be exhausted. On Shabbos, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act and care nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, day of peace." We continue to page 130.
לכו נרנן על אדוני, נריע לצור אישנו. לכו נרנן על אדוני, נריע לצור אישנו, נקדם פניו בתודה, בזמירות נריע לו. כי אל גדול אדוני, ומלך גדול על כל אלוהים, אשר בידו מחירי ארץ, בתועפות הרים לו. אשר לא הים והוא עשהו, ביבשת ידיו יצרו. כי הוא אלוהינו ואנחנו אמריתו וצאן ידו.
135 with Romemu.
רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו וישתחוו בהר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו רוממו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו. רוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו.
Excuse me, 138, L'chado Di.
דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבורך תשמיענו, אל המיוחד אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשם בתחילה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי באורך קומי אורי. אורי, אורי, שיר דמרי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
For those who are able, we rise together to greet Shabbat HaMalkah.
בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה, לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לכאן דודי לקראת קלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
We continue the bottom of page 145. Teach me, O God, a blessing, a prayer, on the mystery of a withered leaf, unripened fruit so fair, on the freedom to see, to sense, to breathe, to know, to hope, to despair. Teach my lips a blessing, a hymn of praise, as each morning and night you renew your days. Lest my day be today as the one before, lest routine set my ways. We continue with our Chetzi Kaddish right there, 144.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבם, בעלמא תברח חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכון ובימיכון ובחי לכל בית ישראל. בגלה, בגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבא מברך, לעלם ולעלמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם, ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשם. בריחו לאלה מן כל ברכתם ושירתם, תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן מעלמם, ואמרו amen.
For those who are able, we rise together, 146.
Yada die die die, 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 yada die die die. Am I awake? Am I prepared? Are you listening to my prayer? Can you hear my voice? Can you understand? Am I awake? Am I prepared? Barechu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach. Le'olam evaen, le'olam evaen. Yada dai dai dai, 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 yada dai dai dai.
We continue at the top of page 148.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim b'chochma potea she'arim uvitvuna meshanei itim umachalif et hazmanim umesader et hakochavim b'mishmerotehem barakia kirtsono barei yom v'layla galel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or umavir yom uvein laila umavdil bein yom uvein laila Adonai tziva'ot shemo El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim.
Amen.
We continue on the next page.
Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha ahavtam Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadetam Al kein Adonai Eloheinu B'shochbeinu ufkumeinu nasiach mechukecha Venismach b'divrei Toratecha U'b'mitzvotecha le'olam ba'ed Ki heim chayei באורך ימינו ובהם נחגה יומם בלילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Adonai Echad Baruch Shem Kevod Shem Kevod
Etz Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odzecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'elech asher anochi mitzavecha hayom alevavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam b'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lektecha v'derech uv'shochbecha uv'kumecha ukshartam le'ohot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot beineinecha uktavtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
He's going to replace both of us soon. The top of page 157, we continue together. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe that we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt. There is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness. There's no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together, our song of freedom and liberation of the Jewish people, our Michamocha, at the top of page 158.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. נורא תהילות עושה פלא, נורא תהילות עושה פלא, אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד. מלכותך ראו בניך בוקע ים לפני משה ומרים, זה אלי אנו ואמרו, זה אלי אנו ואמרו, אדוני מלוך לעולם ועד. יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די, יאי די 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 די.
We continue together the top of page 161. That there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Our Hashkivenu 160.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamideinu shomreinu l'chaim. Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide us in wisdom, compassion, and trust. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom V'hamideinu shomreinu l'chaim. save us for the sake of your name. Shield us from hatred, sorrow, and pain. Hashkivenu Adonai, Eloheinu leshalom, Behamideinu shomreinu
Top of page 163. We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens all the time. The top of page 162.
V'shameru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat l'torotam berit olam beini u'bein bnei Yisrael oti le'olam le'olam ki sheishet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz u'bayom hashvi Shabbat v'inafash.
We continue the middle of page 165. Prayer invites God's presence to suffuse our spirits, God's will to prevail in our lives. Prayer may not bring water to parched fields, nor mend a broken bridge, nor rebuild a ruined city. But prayer can water an arid soul, mend a broken heart, and above all, rebuild a weakened will. For those who are able, we rise for our tefillah 166.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel v'Elohei Leah האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם, בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם, אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיי מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים. ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים. אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש, וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלה. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We read together at the top of page 173. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. We continue with Ritzei on the next page.
Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu Be'amecha Yisrael U'tefilatam be'ahava tekabel U'tehi leratzon Tamid avodat Yisrael Yisrael Amecha El Karub Lechol Kore'ah V'nei Elavatecha V'choneinu Shefoch Ruchacha Aleinu B'techezena Eineinu B'shuvcha leTzion Berachamim Baruch atah Adonai Hamachazir Shechinato
The top of page 179. Grant us peace, your most precious gift, O eternal source of peace, and give us the will to proclaim its message to all the peoples of the earth. Bless our country as a safeguard of peace, its advocate among the nations. Make contentment reign within our borders, health and happiness within our homes. Strengthen the bonds of friendship and fellowship among all the inhabitants of every land. Plant virtue in every soul, and may the love of your name hallow every home and every heart. Praise to you, Eternal One, who blesses our people, Israel, with peace. The top of page 178.
Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech Adon lechol hashalom. אתה הוא מלך אדום לכל השלום בטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום.
We take a few moments for our own silent prayers.
Yihul ratzon imrei fi Yihul ratzon imrei fi Behagion libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri vekoali. Oh, may the words of my mouth, the meditation of my heart be acceptable before you, O God, my rock and my redeemer. Oseh shalom bimromav, Uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, me'imeru, me'imeru,
On this Shabbat, we especially think of those in our community, those who need of healing of body and spirit. Linda Applebaum, Margaret Bell, Harold Seitlin, Deborah Chagois, Greg Cohen, Karen Edwards, Bruce Fleissig, Belinda Gammon, Edward Goldberg, Jeffrey Goldman, Miriam Goldstein, Josie Hatfield, Abraham Hausman Weiss, Sissy Held, Evelyn Held, Donald Himmel, Ralph Holzman, Joan Jacobson, Corey Kessler, Bart Kolber, Jerry Lapidus, Wayne Lewis, Ashley Meyerson, Marlene Meyerson, Jeffrey Muss, Carol Pizitz, Susan Schumann, Leslie Simon, Chrissy St. Charles, Brenda Weinstein, and Carol Wright. For those with us this evening, if you are thinking of a loved one, we invite you to share that name as my eyes meet yours. For those names mentioned out loud, and for those names that are still in our hearts, we turn to the middle of page 371 for Misha Baruch.
Sheberach avoteinu mekor habracha leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misheperach imotenu mekor habracha lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It was the meeting December 2015 in a somewhat cold San Diego suburb in Encinitas, California. Rachel and I, we had the last small audience with Abraham Foxman, the previous director of the Anti-Defamation League. There were about 15 of us in this living room. He asked us one question: what keeps us up at night? And he let us think about this. This was a setup for him. And to be honest, what keeps me up at night, I was recently married, think about that. Finances, a new position, a year in, all the stuff of the human realities. But for Abe Foxman, this incredible leader of the great Anti-Defamation League during his tenure, this is what kept him up at night. Iran becoming closer to obtaining a nuclear weapon, the threat against our indigenous homeland, the state of Israel, and the third, the rising hate against Jews on college campuses. Foxman, like a prophet from the northern kingdom, predicted his fears. We can say that his tenure at the helm of the ADL truly embodied the early 20th century creation of its genesis. The ADL, a Jewish nonprofit, a special order of B'nai B'rith, a special order to secure the Jewish people, advocate for the state Yisrael, and fighting against anti-Semitism. One of the things that we celebrate in Judaism is the idea of critical thinking. It's the shades of gray, it's the nuances, it's examination of all sides. We're not supposed to be a binary religion. And so before I make my next thought and statements, I want this congregation to know, and those who are watching it, I put a lot of critical examination and nuance into what I'm about to say. For many of us, the ADL is the go-to for combating Jewish hate and all forms of bigotry. For a 120-year organization, their efforts, a lot of them should be celebrated, especially their work interfacing with law enforcement, local and the FBI, and fighting against different forms of extremism. But there is certain realization that we need to come to. That the post-Foxman tenure is different. New leaders come, and I'm not the only one who shares this assessment. In a way, this is the third rail of Jewish life. Don't touch it, the ADL. But to those who know me, I can't hold back. Based on their literature, their press releases, and other forms of communication, it appears that they are more political, siding with a certain political ideology, in which I believe and many Jews believe, harming their mission as they once started in the early 20th century. Setting new policies and staff hires that are deeply troubling and are worthy of mentioning even on Shabbat. Recently, they hired someone named Tima Smith, the director of Jewish outreach. And here are some of her quotes in the past. Jews have to be okay with Palestinians while they turn to terrorism. In 2014, she wrote an article entitled, "There are no good guys in the Gaza-Israel conflict." She also wrote, "Hamas and the Palestinians as a whole have a real and legitimate grievances against Israel." She also retweeted, "Repent, for Gaza's dead." Again, this is the person who is now the director of Jewish outreach. She has retracted. She has apologized. And I think in the spirit of Judaism, we honor a genuine form of an apology. But this second chance is not leading this critical division. The ADL missed the mark 5 years ago, suggesting that Ilhan Omar, then an ardent Jew hater, was inspiring. A few years ago, the ADL came out in defense of Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. From the ADL, we oppose broadly applying an anti-Semitic label to these human rights organizations. Doing so is neither accurate nor helpful to fight against anti-Semitism. Rather, this move would politicize the fight against anti-Semitism. The Human Rights Watch, which has led for a couple decades, is led by someone named Ken Roth, who is an open Jew hater and is called Israel an apartheid state. And I'm sure that you've heard recently the new report from Amnesty International, another Jew-hating NGO organization. And here is what they put in their report that just came out, and it's 280 pages. Hamas was mentioned 26 times. Rocket was mentioned 6 times. Fatah was mentioned 4 times. Tunnel, 1. Islamic Jihad, 0. Suicide bomb, bombing or bomber, 0. Apartheid, 686. Full disclosure, the ADL condemned this report. But Amnesty International was the same Amnesty International a few years ago when it came to its defense. And here lies our main problem. Around the summer of 2020, the ADL changed the definition of racism. The marginalization and or oppression of people of color based on socially constructed racial hierarchy that privileges white people. This is not the definition of racism. It's a form of a position statement catering towards a new form of intersectional ideology that I spoke about 2 weeks ago. It's not only wrong, and this is not how we create a just world. And this is why we have the whoopee problem. For those who watch The View, this is daytime television. This is what's everything wrong in our society, The View. She said, Whoopi Goldberg, the Holocaust isn't about race. Because of radical thinking, hyper-tribalism, and what I spoke about again 2 weeks ago, this idea that intersectional theory rejects Jews as an oppressed class. Because if Jews are successful and they deem success all forms, but above all, the creation of the state of Israel in 1948, this success had to come at the expense of oppressing someone else. And therefore, this is why, for Whoopi, the Holocaust isn't about race. By the ADL definition, as scholars have suggested, this was the on-ramp for her to suggest this. And this is why we have something new, Holocaust revisionism. More people won't learn about the truth of the Holocaust. We're losing survivors. And Whoopi, in front of a live audience, totally revised the story of Jewish life, our pain, our suffering, between 1933 and 1945. For 2,000 years, for the most part, Jews were separated based on their religious identity. This is what Augustine refers to. Label them as Jews. And for those who've ever been to Europe or traveled throughout what would be Speyer or Worms, you would see pictures of Jews with a little circular donut to identify the Jews. But if they converted to Christianity, they were accepted. But it wasn't until the 19th century, someone named Wilhelm Marr, who changed the story for the Jewish people. He said that Jews are not religiously different, but Jews are an inferior race based on their blood. And this led to the establishment of the Nuremberg laws, and this is why if you were a quarter Jew, your story was to the gas chambers for the Nazis. The ADL did contend this statement by pointing this out. Then they rewrote the definition of racism because of this crisis. They accepted Whoopi's apology, believing that she has always stood for Jews. But again, I can't say this. In the early 90s, she decided to write a cookbook. And one recipe she called the Jewish American Princess Fried Chicken. A couple years ago, when Israel was facing an onslaught of Palestinian terrorism, she supported the Palestinians. And above all, a new terminology of cultural appropriation, she culturally appropriated a Jewish last name for her own benefit. She is not Jewish. So what's next? What do we do now? In the spirit of Jewish nuance, in the spirit of examination, and even teshuvah, I firmly believe that the ADL needs to have a reset, a reevaluation to ensure it represents the special order of B'nai B'rith. Since Foxman's retirement, the literature, some of the positions are not in the core belief system of the Jewish people. A special order of B'nai B'rith needs to represent all Jews from all movements. The past few weeks since Texas, just days after the world commemorated International Holocaust Remembrance Day, Nazi swastikas were painted on a Union Station in D.C. Multiple synagogues and Jewish-owned businesses in Chicago were awful graffitied with Nazi symbols. There was a neo-Nazi rally in Orlando. This week's global anti-Semitism report highlighted 52 media reports of Jew hatred attacks, 34% from the far right, 20% from the far left, 16% from radical Islam, and 30% from unviable in nature. A third of Canadian students don't understand the Holocaust or question the Holocaust. A quarter of Australians are unaware of the Holocaust. And nearly 1 in 3 young Germans, and this is somewhat new, hold Jew hatred beliefs, because Germany was supposed to be this new melting pot country, but now the tides are changing for the bad again. More than 90% of American Jews are concerned about Jew hatred. Increased 75% in France, and 2021 has been the most anti-Semitic year so far the past decade, this past month. We desperately need an ADL like the mold of Foxman to help us in this fight. I'm not for cancel culture. I'm not calling for Greenblatt's resignation. I would love to invite him here to have discourse, to debate. We can be honest and tell them that the ADL has done great things, but for now, a lot of what they do is broken. They are overly ideological, they're partisan, trying to fit in a mold of a woke coastal philosophy that is simply angering more Jews and not protecting us. In light of my sermon 2 weeks ago, some members of this congregation were concerned about me closing doors with traditional interfaith partners and sidelining Jewish organizations like the ADL. Sometimes doors need to be closed, but we're not locking them forever until they fix their homes, until certain American church denominations can remove all of the Israel hate. They can stop engaging with BDS and show up for us when we don't need to ask. Then we can have their assurances that we can partner with them. And as I said to these few congregants, even as I close these doors temporarily, we are not alone. We have doors that are open. For our interfaith partners and friends, I'm proud to say that Temple Emanu-El has a great friend in the U.S. Israel Education Association, led by Heather Johnson in Birmingham, and also Jahan Burns, who's been part of the Federation. It's organizations like this that we can count on. The work they've been doing in Congress and in Israel has been amazing. And when things happen to the Jewish people, they show up for us when we don't need to ask. And another great partner for us is CUFI, Christians United for Friends of Israel, another incredible organization that supports us. And just like our traditional interfaith partners, they have different religious beliefs. They don't proselytize and respect Jews as the core. But they're here for us. And these are the doors that we need to take. I want our congregation to engage with new and cutting-edge Jewish organizations that stick to the mission. Stand With Us, an unbelievable Jewish nonprofit. They are on the ground fighting against BDS, and any student, whether in college, in high school, faces any form of Jewish hate. Another organization that we will partner with called Combat Anti-Semitism. Another nonprofit, End Jew Hatred, which is a civil rights movement that focuses solely on justice for the Jewish people. And finally, a critical organization that's in our corner, the Canary Mission. It's this organization which is a database. They find and document in social media, on the internet, and speeches any promotion of Jewish hatred, any individual or organization that engages in hate against us, whether from the far right or from the far left. So here are my last two questions. I can tell you what doesn't keep me up at night, and that is being afraid of speaking out against the ADL or offering this congregation new partners for us during times of need. People were concerned that if I talked about these topics, that there would be some type of backlash. For those who know me, I'm not afraid. So what keeps me up? Health, family, and the Jewish community, you, and Israel. As long as you have me as your rabbi, this will be the new direction the Temple Emanu-El needs to go in for the future. A parsha for this week, Truma, speaks of a sanctuary that will home God's presence. And this sanctuary was destroyed 2,000 years ago because Jews couldn't get along. It's time to rewrite the pages of our history. It's time to recognize when things are broken and things need to be fixed. And it's time we have a new chapter with new partners so they can be there for us. Once again, these are my words. I own them. Shabbat Shalom. For those who are able, we rise together. Aleinu 586.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. מה אנחנו קוראים ולמשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ היום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to all of humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. Thank you. On this Shabbat, we recall the yortzites of Patricia C. Bailey, Lillian Muriel Burchuk, Daniel Benton, Michael J. Blonder, Betty Ann Pearl Blumenthal, Mel Brook, Robert Carafoil, Bruce Castle, Abraham Cohen, Mina Louise Coleman, Charlotte Elmitz, Florence Elsis, Louis S. Elsis, Stanley M. Erdrich Sr., Samuel Estroff, Alice Edelson, Charles Fetter, Jacob Fies, Francis Frozen, Sylvia Gandler, Rebecca Slive Gingold, Dominic Gerdicke, Herman Goldberg, Morris Goldstein, Gussie Goldstein, Edward Hiller, Maurice J. Ives, Harry O. Cantor, Suzanne Kirschberg, Isaac Kijanevsky, Beatrice E. Cohn, Harvey Corman, Itka Cronenberg, Lou Lazarus, Edna Kemenshine Levine, Natalie McFarlane, Nancy Medelson, Violetta Newrith, Bella Perlman, George Phillips, Morris Piha, Mike Reisen, Max Rittenbaum, Cecile Hiller Rodriguez, Joseph David Rosen, Leon Rosenthal, Rita Routman, Ben Rutstein, Marvin Silverstein, Carolyn Sloss, Sid Stanton, Charles B. Todd, May Clara Wheel, and B.G. Winnick. Our heartfelt condolences in the recent passing of Lynn Harris Spielberger Bloomston, mother of Wendy Rudkoff, Alice Hewell Brooks, grandmother of Daniel Adrezin, Maida Himmel, mother of Deborah Abalafia, and Gerald Lewis, uncle of John Lewis. We rise together as united congregation for Moorish Kaddish 598. Yikadal Vikada Shemei Rabbah, Biomad Ivrach Reotei Vamlich Malchutei, Bechayachon of Yomechon, Uvchaye de Kol Beit Yisrael, Bagala Vizman Kari Vimru.
Amen.
Yehei Shemei Rabbah Mevarach Leolam Ulamei Maya, Yiparach Vishtabach Vitba'ar Vitromam Vitnaseh, Vitadar Vitalev Vitalal Shemei Kudsha,
Brichu.
Le'ela Min Kol Birchata V'Shirata, Tushbechata V'Nechamata, Damiram Be'alma V'Imru.
Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'Chaim Aleinu Ve'Akol Yisrael, V'Imru. Amen. Oseh Shalom Mimromav, Huya Seh Shalom, Aleinu Ve'Akol Yisrael, V'Imru. Amen.
Oseh Shalom Mimromav, Huya Seh Shalom, Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, Ne'imeru. Amen.
Conclude our Shabbat service with the Don Olam 625.
Adon Olam asher malach b'terem kol Yetzir nivra le'ed nasa b'chefzo kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kichlot hakol לבדו ימלוך נורא, והוא היה, והוא הווה, והוא יהיה בתפארה, והוא אחד ואין שני, להמשיל לו, להכבירם, בלי ראשית, בלי תכלית, ולא העוז והמשרה, והוא אלי וחי גואלי, וצור חבלי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ביום אקרא, בידו אפקיד רוחי, בעת ישן ואירן, ואם רוחי גוויעתי, אדוני לי ולא אירא.
Please join us for a motzi.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, המוציא לחם מן הארץ בתיאבון.
Take a bite, man. You gotta make it. You gotta eat
That's
it.
all yours. Good Shabbos, everybody.
That's all you're calling. Enjoy.